what the flip is going on with Manjaro right now. So you may have seen it on Twitter or seen other Linux YouTubers talking about this, but many members of the Manjaro team have dropped the Manjaro 2.0 manifesto here, and they're basically trying to change how the Manjaro project is led and the direction the project is going. And so with this video, I sort of aim to basically go over a lot of the problems Manjaro had as a project and basically sort of help explain why all of this is going on. And then we can actually discuss the manifesto after that. So first off, let's talk about some problems with Manjaro. I've never been the biggest fan of Manjaro. We're going to go into why in a second, but some people were surprised that I put Manjaro, I think, as a C tier on my Linux distros tier list in my last video. There's quite a few reasons why I've never been a fan of Manjaro and why I didn't recommend it. And some of these problems has also helped lead up to this manifesto being published and made. So I think it is important that we discuss some of the problems Manjaro has as a platform. First off, this isn't an inherent problem with Manjaro, but it's just a very important distinction to make. Manjaro is not Arch. It's not your typical Arch-based Linux distribution because Manjaro holds back packages for extra testing and stability. So this turns Manjaro sort of from a rolling release distribution like Arch Linux would be over to actually be a semi-rolling Linux distribution. And so a lot of people install Manjaro as the easy Arch Linux distro, but it's different enough that that is not a good reason to install Manjaro. That would be like installing Ubuntu because you want Debian. Ubuntu makes so many changes to the base platform that it is pretty different from Debian, and Manjaro doesn't make as many changes as Ubuntu, but it still makes enough that you shouldn't be installing this as just a Arch-based operating system. It's different from Arch. Additionally, many people install Manjaro specifically for the AUR. However, the AUR on Manjaro can break your system because of the fact that Manjaro is holding back packages here, and they claim that they don't support the AUR, yet they make it super easy to enable the AUR with the distro's own tools, and they don't really provide sufficient warnings inside of the Linux distribution itself, so you shouldn't install Manjaro for the AUR either. That said, again, Manjaro not being Arch is not a bad thing. It's just something that should be noted. It's different from Arch, and it does become a bad thing when the entire Linux community thinks that you're installing Arch with an easy installer, like a lot of especially beginner Linux users seem to think Manjaro is. Now, this isn't that relevant to the manifesto, but that's just a important distinction that I want to make, because the thing is, Manjaro is a full platform. They make their own repositories. They aren't 100% just building on top of Arch as a platform, because they make enough changes that Manjaro is its own platform. And when you're building a package platform like Manjaro is, you have a lot of extra responsibility in making sure that packages that are part of your platform work well and just, work as they're supposed to work. However, Manjaro has made a lot of incompetent mistakes that just make it not a very good package platform. I will cut Manjaro some slack. Everybody makes mistakes. There's human error. I'm currently working on StillOS, and I definitely will probably make mistakes down the line and accidentally break things. In fact, StillOS is still in preview stages, but I've already made mistakes with the preview. I actually lost my signing keys for updates, which made it so my users had to manually intervene to upgrade from preview 1 to preview 2. But the thing about that is I learned from my mistake, and now I have my signing keys backed up in multiple places. I don't have them inside of cloud storage because I don't want that to get hacked and then someone able to maliciously push updates out. But I do now have my signing keys backed up on multiple physical USB drives that are in different locations. So I learned from my mistake there. The thing about Manjaro is they seem to not learn from their mistakes, because they've had a couple instances where they've made the same mistake multiple times. So for one, Manjaro has let their SSL certificate expire 4 times, which makes their website end up throwing security warnings when you go in due to not supporting HTTPS. And it also breaks package management, because Pacman, if it cannot establish a secure connection through HTTPS, it ends up not working because they don't want some sort of man-in-the-middle attack where someone intercepts the URL and delivers a malicious package. And they've actually let their SSL certificate expire 5 times if you include the Manjaro form. Now, if we look at the Manjaro SSL certificate here, they're actually using Let's Encrypt for their SSL certificate. So Let's Encrypt is a nonprofit that gives out free TOS certificates that allow you to get SSL/HTTPS on your website. And there is a very easy to use tool called CertBot that lets you automate the renewal of your SSL certificate, which prevents you from even getting expired SSL certificates in the first place. So one of these 4 times that this has happened, Manjaro could have easily gone in and said, oh, we don't want this to happen again. Let's just use CertBot, which most people are already using. I'm already using this for StillOS. Pretty much any guide on how to set up a web server will also teach you how to set up CertBot. So this is just pure incompetence that this isn't set up. And if we go to the Wayback Machine, one of the times that they let their SSL certificate expire, they basically gave an official workaround to just set their system time back, which 1, people shouldn't have to be doing in the first place. That's stupid. And 2, that can break other things on your system. Now, as a platform, another thing that Manjaro did is they ended up shipping a Asahi Linux kernel that is completely broken for M1 Mac users. For those who don't know, Asahi Linux is a project to bring Linux to ARM, M1, and M2 Macs, and soon more processors that they're working on. And Manjaro just shipped a kernel from their dev builds without testing it, and it didn't even work. And their developer here even claims that they were upstreaming broken things behind the Asahi Linux projects back to Asahi Linux's own upstream projects. Finally, if you look at the Manjaro system update script right here, this code right here removes the Pacman database lock. And if you don't know what that means, essentially a lot of package managers, when you're actually running them, they have this lock file that basically tells other instances of the package manager not to run because an operation is already happening right now. And if multiple package manager operations happen at the same time, it can actually break the package manager and cause a bunch of problems. So doing any type of database lock like that is just unnecessarily risky for no reason whatsoever. Oh, look, they do it right here too, and right here. It does this for quite a few different areas. It is better to use some sort of queue system instead, where it just runs the operation that it needs to do in Pacman either before or after a different operation has finished running. And I have firsthand experience developing something like this because I made a tool called Still App Manager for my distro StillOS, which is used as the de facto library for system updates and the StillOS Software Center, because we need to manage multiple different packaging systems such as Flatpak, SWI, and bootc for upgrades. And so from developing that, I can tell you firsthand, you should never be removing a database log file like that in a package manager. Like I said, just set up a queue system. That's what I did for this project here. Now, this is a really old package and they have since fixed it, but my point is the fact that this was even approved in the first place is something that they did is just beyond incompetent. This should have never even been a feature in Manjaro in the first place. And then the final thing I would like to cover is that Manjaro has DDoSed the AUR on accident. It wasn't on purpose, but they accidentally sent thousands of requests to the AUR per user, resulting in the AUR getting DDoSed and being offline for every single Arch-based distro for a few hours. They have done this twice now. So I'm not trying to completely take a shit on the Manjaro devs, but when you're building an entire package platform the same way Manjaro is doing, because again, Manjaro is not Arch, there needs to be some degree of QA to prevent random problems like all of these things I just mentioned here. Now, by the way, one of the sites I referenced when making this video, there's this website called Manjarno, which covers all of these different SSL certificate things, some stability issues in the AUR, just most of the stuff I covered. This site is a little bit out of date, but I just do want to point this out since I use this heavily as a source. That said, all of this leads over to the Manjaro 2.0 Manifesto, because the rest of the Manjaro team is tired of the leadership going on at Manjaro right now. So this is the Manjaro 2.0 Manifesto and the announcements on their forums, and they say this is going to cover the organizational, technical, management, and other changes they want to see to the project right here. So if you go to their motivation, they're saying the Manjaro project has been declining over the past decade. Yes, it had a sizable user base, but it stagnated, lost trust, and lost almost all of its contributors, and even became a laughingstock for repeatedly making the same mistakes over and over again and never even attempting to address these known issues. So it is about to mention the SSL certificates, but I'm guessing some of the other known issues is some of the things I just covered. So they talk about the TOS certificates here. They're saying the current leadership of Manjaro Manjaro's goal is to turn Manjaro into a successful business, and these attempts have mostly failed. And they're saying the Manjaro project right now is being ran as one individual person's project, being centralized around this individual person. And this person refuses to share essential access to both the maintenance of the project and the supporting infrastructure. Now, I'm guessing the person that they're referring to here is the project leader right now, Philip Moeller. I don't really know who else they could be referencing, and he's the main person to reply to this post, which you'll see later on. The Manjaro name is only being used for its popularity, and the community is only used as guinea pigs and as unpaid workers. And as a result, the project is severely suffering. Now, this manifesto claims that no attempt is being made to acquire any funds for the project, and that the funds owned by the Manjaro GmbH and Co. KG company, so that's just the Manjaro company. A GmbH, I believe, is the German equivalent to an LLC in America. And as a result, the project funds have now ran out, causing Manjaro's only full-time dev to lose their only source of income. So these contributors want the Manjaro project to be revitalized, regain respect, attract contributors, and again provide meaningful value to the open source community. We would also like to put our envisioned organizational restructuring into writing right away as we seek to reshape Manjaro into a proper community project and have it organized in such a way to provide flexibility and opportunity instead of blockers. And now, the implementation they want, one, they want to spin off the Manjaro OS project into a nonprofit or an EV. So that would be the German equivalent to a nonprofit in America, I assume. So it's called an EV, but just for the sake of this video, I'm gonna call it a nonprofit, even if there are differences to how a nonprofit works in America. Now, I'm gonna skip a lot of this, as this is sort of just governments for the nonprofit and isn't that important to this discussion. So they have a process for joining the team, a process for either leaving the team or how they would kick someone out of the team. Their leadership structure here is going to be decentralized with arbiters who sort of lead certain components of the project without someone taking over a major part of it. There will be a voting system for things that have a meaningful impact on the project, and they want the Manjaro company here to eventually become downstream of the Manjaro nonprofit and will continue to assist the company part to the best of its ability, with the nonprofit handling work for the community in the Manjaro Linux distribution. They also want the nonprofit to handle the trademark until the end of 2029, but also allowing the company to use that trademark for its own products as long as it doesn't conflict with any community use of it. The nonprofit will basically handle all of the distribution infrastructure here, and the company can use the nonprofit infrastructure as long as the usage costs are paid for. The nonprofit gets manjaro.org, but the company can still use subdomains, and the company can also continue to use the email server. So in my opinion, this is a pretty fair relationship for the community maintained nonprofit and the company. So originally they had stage 0 where they had this internally without taking any action, and then they eventually publicly released this document, which is why I'm covering it now. And stage 2 will be that they will consider forking or leaving the Manjaro project with all of the people signing this if things don't get done here. They also had some stage on how they rolled this out on the forums, not that important. Now, Philip Moeller did respond here. He's saying he has no objections, but that he will not be personally involved in any founding processes of this new legal nonprofit entity, and that association members should not be involved in the company in any way. Any actions that could damage the business must be ruled out, and assets relevant to the company will remain. I think this is a pretty reasonable response. Like, he could have gone full crash out mode, he didn't seem to do that. And then just some more discussion here. Then they ended up posting this on the forums. Now, 3 days ago, Philip Moeller said that this feels like mutiny on the bounty, and he says back in 2019 that they made the transition from a community project to a community-driven company, and he's basically saying that he's down for this, it just cannot happen overnight. So he's basically saying the ball is in their court, go ahead, do it, and then he'll help transition things over. They even got a domain for the company here, and that so far seems to be the end of it as of 3 days ago of me recording this video. So this video is coming out tomorrow, so it'll be 4 days up to date when you guys see this video. Now, one thing is, this has happened in the past, where back in July of 2014, Phoronix reported that there is a huge major exodus of Manjaro's developers. So Manjaro has seen stuff like this happen in the past, but I feel like we kind of got the good ending here. If we go back up here, stage 2 of this was going to be forking Manjaro. Yes, they dropped the F-bomb here. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So that's good for current Manjaro users, as they're not going to have to transition themselves over to a new Linux distribution. So it seems like this nonprofit split is going to happen. Now, to be honest, I do agree that this might not have been a good idea to air out publicly like this, and I honestly somewhat agree with Philip that it is like mutiny on the bounty, because from what I read, it looked like this response right here that he did was from before they ended up publishing it, because it looks like they published this 9 days ago, and this response here is from 12 days ago. So this might be a really bad marketing look from Manjaro, because now we have all these different people covering the internal Manjaro drama. This might have been better if they all agreed on this internally and then just let it happen. And they could have still done some sort of internal strike that just wasn't really publicized in order to put more pressure on Philip to make this happen. Now, publicizing all of this did add even more pressure on Philip. So it did work with their goals to actually get this to become a nonprofit and turn it back into a community project. But I just do think this is a marketing disaster for Manjaro, because from all the issues I've talked about earlier in sites like Manjarno, they already had a lot of PR. People do say any publicity is good publicity, but that I don't think applies here, because you need a stable operating system. And when there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes of your operating system, that kind of makes it look like it's not going to be a stable platform, which again, Manjaro isn't just an Arch Linux distro with a theme. They have their own package base. This is a full platform. So honestly, to me, this is a bad PR look. But other than that, it seems like Manjaro may go in a better direction. Hopefully the nonprofit community can do more to prevent all of the problems Manjaro's had in the past with stuff like this right here. I'm not out to just be a Manjaro hater. I really do want Manjaro as a project to succeed. But I do think the outcome of all of this has been good. Thank you for watching this video. I hope this video sort of helps to explain what's going on with Manjaro. Just a lot of drama. I'm trying to just clear things up, make it easier to understand what's going on. If you like this video, you can subscribe to me right here. On the topic of Arch, on Wednesday, I'm going to upload a video on why you don't need the AUR. So on Wednesday, you can click that video, or you can check out this video on my Linux tier list, basically going over the realistic use cases of pretty much all of the major distros you can think of, what they're used for, and how well they execute on their goals. And other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video.